And in the words of Dave, my welding instructor, that was crispy. Hey everyone, so obviously this is not the usual bedroom set for Make It With Calvin, but being that it's the new year, I figured I might as well try doing something a little bit different this time. I'm going to be hopefully trying to take you guys along for the journey of me building a custom stand for my Harbor Freight bandsaw. In short, I bought this thing eons ago at a Harbor Freight in Southern California, and it served me really well. The only problem with it is the original legs that it came with were just total and utter garbage. They were horrible. The main problem is they were very flimsy sheet metal, and anytime you tried to move the thing, it pretty much just rattled all over the place, so I just got rid of them. So what we're going to be doing this week is we're actually going to be building a custom little stand that the saw can sit on. And the advantage of this is the fact that it will let me be able to wheel the saw underneath some tables that I have in the storage room that way. I have a small little walkway area that I'm storing some stuff in, and I'm trying to make it as space efficient as I can. But the problem is the saw takes up like a good half of my table space, and the saw rarely gets used. So I figured, gee, why not put the saw on the floor so I can also wheel it out and use the doorway as kind of like an extension, or I can just wheel it out into the garage when I pull my car out, things like that, to give myself more space and make it more efficient in there as I'm trying to set that up to have drill presses, grinders, potential photo etching equipment. Okay, so off camera, to make my life easier, being that there's not much lighting in that walkway area at the moment, I figured out a plan for the stand. In short, the saw is going to sit on top of it, and I'm debating either building a plywood top or seeing how expensive or difficult it would be to just get some thin sheet metal to put on the top of it. Still not fully sure, but the saw will fit on top, and regardless of how I get it on there, I am going to physically chain the saw to the stand or find a positive securement method for it, so that way I don't have to worry about it sliding off, breaking my foot, unfun things like that. The material I'm going to be using is part of this old bed frame that I found about, I don't know how many years ago. Whoops. And that is pretty much going to be what this project is made out of. I'm also going to need to source some casters and potentially some sheet metal or some plywood for the top, but pretty much that's what we're going to be building this out of, is an old bed frame. Being that I'm on a budget here and I really don't feel like driving to the metal place and spending any more than I need to, I figured we might as well give it a try. And if a bed frame is designed to hold up somebody who weighs at least, with the mattress, 200 plus pounds, I think it should be able to hold my saw just fine. I'm happy to report that I got my 2 short pieces cut and I got my 2 long pieces cut. So obviously this is painted steel, as you can probably tell. So the next step is going to be me stripping the paint off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the angle grinder with a flap disc and just knock off enough of what is on here. Alright, so I got the paint more or less removed. As you can see here, you might not be able to see actually. I got most of it off. I'd say about 75 to 90% depending upon the piece. Okay, so sorry if the joint is totally on my side where you guys can't see it, but in short, the plate that I'm using as a heat base is horribly warped. Just my luck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the welder, and I'm just going to tack in like one corner this part in. I'm using my little angle plate that I built eons ago in my first welding class, and that's doing a pretty good job of holding everything square. I know obviously this thing won't be perfect, but I don't exactly want to be building a trapezoidal saw base. Well, it's not the world's most prettiest weld, but I think it ought to hold. I decided to go literally in one shot for the weld, thinking that would probably give me the most strength. And man, you can smell this powder coat burning off. What I'm definitely going to need to do is come along and grind these welds down. The main thing is I'm just trying to get the frame done so I can strength test it and see if it needs any bracing, and then I can tackle that tomorrow or maybe later today. We'll see. Okay, so it's day 2 of the project. I've got the frame done. I have the little risers that are going to become the feet of this effectively done. The plan is I'm going to weld these to the outside of the frame, and then I'm going to install a piece of sheet metal on the end, drill a hole in that, and that's what the caster is going to actually rest into so I can wheel the cart around. I just so happened to find a piece of material. It gave me 4 pieces that were 5 inches long, so that plus a caster should be more than tall enough to allow the saw to stand vertical if I need to do it for anything like that, but it can still go down and be relatively low to the floor, which is exactly what I'm after. I don't want it exactly scraping the floor, but I definitely want to have a little bit of clearance underneath, so that way I can stick like a chip tray underneath, or if I had just a simple drip coolant system, I have a little bit of clearance underneath so I can store things underneath it, but yet I can still wheel it around and it's not going to take up a whole bunch of space. Alright, so I figured it was easier if I just set down a piece of metal on the little deck back here and just did a couple of tack welds to get these pieces in place, and then once they're in, I can flip it over and actually lay some serious welds. Now, these right here are some angle plates that I picked up a while back at that De Anza College swap meet with my dad. He's all like, "Oh, and what you're gonna use those for?" Well, wonder no more, Dad. They're coming in handy already. I'm not exactly sure how accurate they are, but I figure good enough is good enough for this application, and they were only like $5 a piece, so I couldn't pass them up. So let me go ahead and tack this guy in place, and then we'll take it over from there. Well, as you guys can probably tell, this has gotten welded up. The welds are still pretty toasty on here, but off camera I did give this a standing test, and all about 135 pounds of me standing on this thing, no flexing, so I don't really see a dire need to, that's still hot, still don't see a dire need to add more bracing to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully come along and flap disc the tops of these welds down just to make them look a little nicer. They're not the world's prettiest looking welds, but they're holding. I keep reminding myself this is a fluxcore MIG, so it's not exactly as nice as gas shielded, but hey, you know what, it's coming along nicely. So the next step is going to be, once those are done, will be to figure out how I'm going to add the 4 little feet that the casters are going to fit on. I might go to the hardware store and see what casters they have, or see what I have at home. Alright, so I'm back from getting lunch, and thankfully, Cliff's Hardware, not far from where I live, had these little 80-pound rated swivel casters for sale for about $5 a piece, so I grabbed 4 of them. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take these little 1/8 inch pieces or so of steel, and I'm going to set them on top of here and just weld them into place, and then obviously come along and grind it, drill a hole in the middle, and that's what's going to hold the casters in place. So I've also got a couple more welds that I want to just fill in the insides of a couple of these that never got welded, just for extra strength is probably not 100% critical, but I figure, you know what? It's better than not doing it. I see it this way. If I'm going to build this thing, I might as well weld it up enough so that way I'm not concerned like, ooh, am I going to have this thing, you know, collapse on me when I go to use it? You know, that's what I'm trying to avoid here. So it is day 3 of the project. Yesterday, I went ahead and installed the nuts on the cart. To do so, I ended up using a little bit of brazing rod and just brazed the nuts in place, as the inside had a weld that made it a little tight to fit the nut in there. But hey, you know what? I figured just tack brazing the nut in place wasn't a bad idea. I was able to screw the casters in just fine, and effectively right underneath where I'm filming is where the saw cart is living. So let me go take a few things off for here, set up the lighting for you guys, and show you just how well this whole project turned out, being that it started as a crazy idea and a couple of old bed frames. So sorry if the shot and the lighting and everything like that under here aren't the best, but let me try and show you guys the saw in action. And sorry if I'm going to become like the talking headless person, because the motor here is probably going to block my head in just about a minute when I go to roll it. Should be noted that this floor is not very flat and does have a lot of divots in it. So considering the weight of the saw and the crappy condition of the floor, it actually rolls really nicely. I'm able to quite easily roll it out, you know, roll it down to do my sawing, and then I can just knock everything over. That stuff's just temporary. And roll it right back, which is really, really nice, considering that right there is a doorway. So I can just roll the cart out, do my cutting, have some more space, roll it back in, and I'm done. And considering that the saw, it does get used, it's not super frequently, storing it underneath something gives me a lot more storage space. I have debated building a shelf that comes out about this high, so it clears this, so I can store more equipment like grinders, tumbling equipment, brazing materials, things like that. Being that I'm strapped for space, it's a little bit like a Japanese minimalist apartment. Every single space that you can stick something in practically is being utilized. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project. If you did, please let me know down in the comments. Sorry if I'm a little bit bad at like keeping you guys updated about stuff. My problem is I tend to get a little carried away, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, I should have filmed that. So this was kind of a trial run, if you will, for some future projects. They're not going to be as entailed. This was more kind of like a, well, I need to build it, so let me turn the camera on and make the most of it project. I do highly recommend that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as I do have some pretty awesome stuff planned. And it should be noted that in the 2017 year, I am going to be going back to college, so things are probably going to be a bit more sporadic with uploading videos. So I'm going to try and stick to a decent schedule, but obviously if things get crazy, I'm going to have to prioritize school over this, so I hope you guys understand.